Well, this is our Abbotsford dental project for Mina and Frank. Frank is the dentist and Mina is his wife who helps with running of the business. Now, it's located in Abbotsford. We thought in terms of context, it's really important. One of the reasons why the business is there and it needs to prosper is this growth of the City of Yarra. So the City of Yarra are thinking big. So they're thinking 5 to 7 stories, which we all applaud, and it's a sort of welcomed future for inner city Melbourne. But one thing we're finding is the fringe neighbourhood residential zones need to be able to service those sort of large scale mass housing that, and commercial that is on its way. So a little study, this is that's Johnson Street and Hoddle Street. And we all sort of know this area very well, I assume. So this is down at the Abbotsford Convent. One thing we noticed just at a glance is there's only 3 medical clinics in these sort of fringe areas of the sort of larger development zones. So we thought it's obviously very important to think big, but then it's also important to think small in the sort of finer grain of the suburb. So we're finding here we've got the neighbourhood residential zone sort of bordering the large growth corridors, 10 to 12 stories, 6 to 7 stories along Johnson Street. And then these beautiful little suburbs where under the general residential zone, there's an exemption for medical practices, dental, veterinary clinics, so that you can have commercial buildings operating in residential zones. So this is the site. It was an existing dental practice with very poor amenity. So it's a division of a double-fronted Victorian building on the corner of Nicholson Street and Yarra Street. So the site mediates between single-fronted terraces, a row of single-fronted terraces and a row of double-fronted Victorian buildings. And the subject site for us was really just the rear of this building. So there's 3 consulting rooms in the existing heritage building. And then we're sort of faced with an existing condition where this was the existing 3 consulting rooms, and there's sort of poorly constructed sort of public interface to the medical practice because it was dominated by this ramp. So as we all know, because this is a class 5 building in an office environment, because we're 600 millimetres above natural ground with the heritage building, the ramp becomes the critical factor. So in some ways, the project was about the ramp, and the thing that was challenging about the existing condition was that it was pretty much occupying the street presence, and it had and in terms of a heritage response and a public interface and amenity response, it was very poor. So this was really just a little desk, and then you're straight into the medical practice. So the brief was to provide a waiting room, provide a better street presence, and also, really importantly, provide some staff amenity. So these are, as I explained before, these are the consulting rooms, and then as before, they were pretty much just occupying the lean-to outbuildings and the ramp was really very much just an afterthought, and it was not a very pleasant experience. So existing condition, much like a sort of a renovation to a small house, we knocked off the lean-to, knocked off the ramp, knocked off the entry. We have this subject site that's about 55 square metres. So it's really important to get our heads into this 4.3 metre width room block, and I suppose in meeting disability access requirements and the class 5 building requirements and this requirement for a ramp meant that 55 square metres came down to, however, we did the ramp down to 35 square metres. And then once we have in the disability accessible toilet, then we're down to a footprint on the ground floor of about 25 square metres. So that's sort of not much larger than a small living room. So our design response was to ensure that sort of street engagement. We continued the public realm in that the ramp went up inside the building to the northern side. So the ramp doesn't become a focus in terms of a heritage response or a public interface response. It becomes an experiential thing where we're continuing the bitumen all the way in, and then we're engaging with the sort of party wall of the heritage fabric. And then it allows us to have like a welcoming entry when we have a glass sliding door here into a waiting room, looking at the reception desk, off to get your teeth cleaned. So this distance was just all very tight in that we've got this ramp that comes through, and then we have the disability accessible toilet, little waiting room, and then a stair up to the staff amenity areas. So the upper story addition was primarily for seminars and the breakout space for staff. So some of these staff have been with them for sort of 10 to 15 years, and they're finding that, and Frank is an extremely generous person, he's finding that he doesn't want his staff having lunch in the cafe, and he wants them to be staying on site. He wants them to be able to connect with each other. And in terms of staff retention, was a really important thing. Now we've got a row of single-story terraces here to the left, and in terms of design response, we need to have that negative gap, and we're peeling away from that sort of heritage interface. So this is just a diagram of how the ramp interfaces with the ground floor, and sleeving behind and sort of continuation of the footpath. And then in order to allow a maximum envelope on this site, we were forced to respond to the heritage controls, which is obviously a good thing. And what we're doing here is we're connecting with the datums of the brickwork, the rhythm of the windows, and in terms of the upper story addition, we're treating it as an occupation of the roof as opposed to it being sort of a secondary addition to a two-story form. So why is this project so small? It's a small budget of about $390,000 ex-GST, which is equal to a cafe fit out. And in terms of bang for your buck, it gives you long-term social benefits to the community. We've got a small site of 55 square metres. And when we have all of the requirements, and with the same requirements as a standard office building, the whole project becomes very small. Once again, we have limitations of heritage controls, but very importantly, we've got this small scale infill project of a small budget servicing a larger development future for the area. So this is the project. You see that it was clearly a strong heritage response, but also in terms of how it reads in the street, there's a public interface response there as well. This is the experiential thing of coming in around, this is all bitumen and sort of engaging with the heritage fabric, and then into this sort of welcoming entry. This is the waiting room, off to clean your teeth, starting to open up to the street and sort of maximising the width. So we were able to use the ramp here as part of the building. This is looking down from the staff amenities room into the waiting area. That's that little staff amenities waiting room. And that's upstairs, some disability access requirements, and just this sort of bright and light, welcoming and robust interior. And then you see here how it sort of engages with the street, and this is the continuation of the footpath. So we see it as a small project with a big impact, and the feedback that I've had from a lot of people that go to the dentist here is that it's been a great thing for Abbotsford, and it shows that it doesn't need to be a big budget or a big footprint to have a big impact. Thanks everyone.